Hello, and welcome to Nosotros, the podcast about Mexican-American culture, politics, history, y más. Brought to you in part by the Gámez Law Firm. I'm your host, Elaine Ayala, Metro columnist for the San Antonio Express News. My guests today are Liliana Saldana. She's an associate professor of race, ethnicity, gender, and sexuality at UTSA and a native Southsider. She holds degrees from Boston University, UTSA, and the University of Wisconsin at Madison. Also with us today is Marisa Perez Diaz. She's a member of the Texas Board of Education, now serving her fourth term. Is that correct?
That is correct.
She was instrumental in redeveloping the state's high school graduation requirements and was a leading voice for high school ethnic studies courses. She earned her degrees from the University of Texas at Austin and UTSA. And are you still pursuing a doctoral degree?
I am. Yes.
Okay, in educational leadership. That's wonderful. And of course, the wonderful Juan Tejeda, a musician, writer, arts administrator, educator, activist, editor, and publisher, a man of all seasons. He holds degrees from UT and UTSA as well. He's retired from Palo Alto College, and he's a co-publisher of Aslan Libre Press. His latest book, which I have a copy here, is a family memoir titled Mi Carnal Frank. It was published by Flower Song Press.
Exactly, yes.
And they're here today to talk about National Hispanic Heritage Month. It's not without controversy. Perhaps not over its intent, but about what it has become. Bienvenidos to Nosotros.
Gracias.
Thank you.
Before we get started, I like to start with a couple of rapid-fire questions in a game of this or that. You have to play along.
Okay.
And you can chime in whenever you want, okay?
We don't
have a buzzer?
personal, no.
We're not getting too personal here. It's really universal. Okay. They're hard, though.
Okay.
Bless me última, or the earth did not devour him.
Bless me, última.
The earth did not devour him.
Y no se lo tragó la tierra, by Tomás Rivera.
I know.
So we have
Classics.
Classics.
Both of
Rodolfo
them.
Anaya
They are
and
hard.
Tomás Rivera.
Yeah.
You can't make a decision?
They're both classics. Oh, you're asking us
I'm
all the
asking,
same
yes,
questions? I thought you were just asking
No,
Liliana.
todos.
Hijo, that is hard. Because I love them both. You know, those were some of the early.
I think I'm with you, Liliana.
Early
It was
Chicano
such an important book
literature.
in my life because I read it before Bless Me Última, and it was such a defining thing.
Mm-hmm.
It was sort of, to me, like, Yo soy Joaquin.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, si no puedes, we'll move on.
Well, I'll go ahead and say Tomás. You know,
Okay.
No se lo tragó la
And he
tierra.
was here in San Antonio también,
Yes,
right?
es nativo de Texas, you know.
There's
Rodolfo
a-
Anaya's from Nuevo Mexico. So it's
Yeah.
a little bit different, even
Yes,
though we're obviously related.
yeah.
Pero sí.
Okay, here's one that you should answer first.
Did you ask Marisa?
Oh, I said bless me, última.
Oh, you said bless
but
me,
for the
última.
same reason that Elaine mentioned, the other.
It was
is
a formative.
it was a formative reading
Yeah.
for me.
Yeah.
Narciso Martinez or Flaco Jimenez?
Hija, that is tough too. They're all tough.
I purposely make them up this way so they'll be tough because I like the conversation it
Yeah.
evokes.
And of course, I'm a conjunto accordionist, so Narciso
With-
Martinez is one of the fathers of conjunto music, along with the Don Santiago Jimenez, who's
That's
the
right.
father of Flaco Jimenez and
That's
Santiago Jr.
Pero Flaco is de aquí and he's still alive.
I know.
Come on, give it up.
I think I'm going to have to go with Flaco, even though Narciso
Yes.
was so important as one of the fathers and a distinctive style del Valle, which was different from the
That's right.
Jimenez style here, and the tradition that I come from the Jimenez family.
And let me just say
tradition.
you answered correctly.
Thank you, maestra.
Check. Okay, this is a hard one.
And
for
I'm
me.
the only one that's going to answer that
Oh
one.
no, well you can. I mean,
Well, but we already know what the right answer is.
okay. Lola Beltrán or Lucha Villa? Cucurucucu.
Hijo.
It's hard. It's a hard one too, right?
And Lola Beltran, I presented Lola Beltran here right across from the Express News, the Scottish Rite.
Oh, yes.
I don't know if you remember that years ago.
I wasn't here for that.
When I was at the Guadalupe Cultural Arts Center. So I would have to go with Lola just because of the personal connection that we had with her here.
Yeah. I like both of them. I grew up with both of their music. My grandmother, I have so many memories of my grandmother listening to both of these incredible women, vocalists. Oh my goodness, this is going to be really hard, but Lola Beltrán.
And I will be very honest, I am only familiar with Lola Beltrán.
Okay, all right. So one time when I was a very young journalist in Corpus Christi, Texas, working for the Caller Times, they send me to the local Coliseum, say, hey, we need you to cover the double bill. It's Mexican double bill. It was Lola Beltrán and Lucha Vieja.
Wow.
I called my mother. I was so excited. Okay. House on Mango Street or Yo Soy Joaquin?
I'll say House on Mango Street. For again, it was another formative read for me. And it's actually one of the very first pieces of literature that I read where I actually felt seen as a Latina. So that it holds a really special place in my heart.
Same. I have to say that's probably the first Chicana literature I ever read. But Yo Soy Joaquin is epic.
Oh, yeah.
It is an epic poem.
It's an epic poem. And the first time I heard it, I was in Philadelphia. And I think I was in the Mecha group, of course. And they had a little film with a poet reading it aloud. And all of us were mesmerized and stunned because we didn't see ourselves. So for me, House on Mango Street came later.
Much later.
So
I would have to say Yo Soy Joaquin for that reason, because it was early. It was early on that he published that poem. Years before House on Mango Street, or just when I first went to college, 1972, the University of Texas at Austin, and got involved and took my first Chicano studies class and read that poem because it was a Chicano, first Chicano history, then a Chicano literature course.
yes.
And it was really powerful and spoke to me when I had, like you said, we had not seen too many things that was representing us in literature.
We were still searching for them, and there were very few, at least at the University of Pennsylvania. There was only one course I ever took, and it came from a visiting professor from Yale who had us like half a semester. Okay, West Side. I know how you'll answer this. West Side or South Side?
South Side all the way.
South Side.
Of course, you're from the South
No,
Side.
y'all, West Side.
Okay, South Side, West Side.
There you
All
go.
right, okay. Corn or flour?
That's a hard one too.
Flower.
So funny. The Castros had such a hard time with it when they were here.
I
Yeah.
love corn. I mean, I grew up with corn. I come from a lineage of people who grew corn for,
Yes.
in their ranchos. And
Sí.
my grandmother nixtamalized corn and she would make tortillas and she would sell them. I had my first flour tortilla, I think, when I was like 13. And I fell in love with them.
Of course, they're fabulous. It's like pancakes.
I'm on the Chicano diet. One flour, one corn.
Okay.
So not to eat
do
both
that
flours.
sometimes. I do that too. I somehow I relieve my guilt
Yeah.
by saying, pero el otro en maíz. La barbacoa en maíz.
Yeah. I mean, uno es más sano que el otro. Hey, that's how you balance. But I am definitely flour.
Yeah. Well, we were raised with flour. We would only have corn on the weekends with barbacoa.
Oh, yeah.
With caldo.
Caldo for
Corn.
sure.
Yeah.
But flour like
My
every
mother
day.
was making flour every day.
Yeah, I remember
Sometimes
that.
for breakfast and lunch and having dinner.
And she was not only making them for my father, but my father loved to take taquitos to his colleagues, at the laundry and cleaners. And so he would have a little kettle, like it had a lonche, and then he had like a stack of tortillas.
Oh.
Wow.
I remember the sound it
My
would
poor mom.
make when my abuelita would make the little balls of masa.
Oh, I know.
Just the little clapping for me, it's really nostalgic because I can smell it. So I just remember, and she'd make flour tortillas all the time.
Yeah.
And I remember my abuela also lived behind her house there on the south side that she would make the masa de maíz, the tortilla, and she had the
press.
The press,
press.
Tortilla press.
She would make us fresh Corn tortillas were great too. I love them.
Did your mom ever make gorditas?
Oh, my grandmother did.
Oh my God. I have not made those ever. Because you have to put a lot of oil in that pan to get it.
Deep fry them.
Deep fry them. Okay. All right. Now to the subject at hand. So before we
Which
start.
is related.
Which is related, of course. All of this is related.
Yeah.
One of the events that tipped off this podcast idea was on the merits of National Hispanic Heritage Month is a video I saw on Facebook that was put out by the city of San Antonio, whose permission we have to use. And it features UTSA scholar John Philip Santos. Let's listen in.
When people talk about Hispanic Heritage Month, to me, I always tell them that in San Antonio, Hispanic Heritage Month is every month. We are immersed in the history that led to the creation of the city born under the sun of another empire. San Antonio, in a sense, I regard as the capital of Mestizo America. Mestizaje and being mestizos has always been at the center of our being, center of our identity. And mestizaje is a word for mixture. There's not really a proper word for it. In Mexico, there was this mestizaje that created a new kind of identity, this mestizo identity. And that really is connected to San Antonio's founding because of the people who were involved in that story and then the city that has unfolded, this, you could say, international city that has unfolded.
Isn't that great? He's so good at this. I'll start with you, Marisa. National Hispanic Heritage Month. What are its merits and what are its flaws?
Oh gosh, so I'll start with flaws, in a positive note. So I think that what we see regularly in in media and even through I think through neoliberalism, right, is this sort of commodifying of a culture that is really beautiful and really nuanced. And it's really unfortunate because you'll see individuals, you'll see images in media and companies putting out, publications that picture stereotypical figures of, what they perceive to be Hispanic heritage. And for me, when I see those sorts of things, it's like, well, have you been doing the work, right, to learn about who we truly are? Do you understand that there's truly diversification, right, within our population, right? We're not a monolith, and are you taking on these cultures just to sell a product, right? At what point do we look at some sort of like we're really trying to resonate with you, or when is it just appropriation for the purposes of making money? Like those things I think about frequently when we talk about Hispanic Heritage Month and even within the nomenclature of that title, I think that there's not everybody appreciates being referred to as Hispanic, right?
Oh no, of course, it's such a troublesome word.
It really is, and for those that don't understand the history of it, go back into understanding how the census was established and how people just needed to be bucketed into certain lists just to make, oh yes, we're classifying you, yeah, you're recognized, but we're going to put whatever label on you because we don't recognize, again, the nuance, right, the differences. So I think from that perspective, I regularly see and am very conscientious of what's happening around us. On the other hand, I think that there is attention being placed on our cultures, though not always in a positive way, but at least there's attention. We're not being neglected. People are beginning to see who we are and aspects of our culture that are becoming more familiar to, I think, just the general population, which is fantastic. But the other thing that I think about is, and perhaps this is also like, it's not so negative or perhaps contentious in nature, but I think there's opportunity in education, right? Wearing the role that I play, right, in that we can engage our young people, and they don't necessarily have to be Latino or mestizo or, Hispanic or Mexican American, right? Any child will benefit from learning about the cultures and the nuances within the Latino community, right? And I don't think that there's much opportunity there. We just haven't poured in enough energy and time and commitment to making sure that representation exists in education.
Yes, because every kid can be moved by a reading of Yo Soy Joaquin. They don't have to be Mexican American to appreciate a good poem, an epic poem. Liliana.
Okay. Well, I'd never really heard of Hispanic Heritage Month until I was a professor. In my undergraduate years, I went to a predominantly white institution. There was no such thing as Hispanic Heritage Month. I think there was one Chicano professor, Tino Villanueva.
Oh, I remember Tino,
literary
yes.
writer. I believe he was the only Chicano faculty.
And this was at UT?
No, this was in Boston.
Oh, in Boston.
Then I came to UTSA for my master's degree. That's where I met Juan. And then, to the University of Wisconsin. I came back to San Antonio, to Yanaguana. And I remember seeing the amazing programming that Juan would organize through the Mexican American Studies program. And it was called Raza Heritage Month. And I really liked that. And I'm sure it was called Hispanic Heritage Month at one time. But I really appreciated the decolonizing of the term Hispanic, right? To reflect our communities, because our communities are indigenous. They are Chicano, Chicana, Chicanx. They are Afro-Indigenous. And that to me was really important to see that. And so Mexican American studies, going back to your question, Chicano studies, Chicanx studies, was born out of student liberation movements. It was born out of a struggle to not just create a field of study that was dedicated to our communities, but that was created to really decolonize academia, all of academia, because our people were not in those spaces, right? These institutions were not created for us. So when I think of Hispanic Heritage Month, and I was looking at the history of Hispanic Heritage Month, right, how it went from 1 week to a full month, right, and that it was to observe the contributions of Hispanic people, that it was also connected to the liberation movements in Latin America, that to me is what resonates with me.
There were all Independence Days in Latin America that were acknowledging.
Exactly. I mean, 5 countries or colonized territories in present-day Central America: Costa Rica, Nicaragua, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, Mexico, right? El 16 de septiembre, also Chile on September 18th. So for me, I center the voices, the experiences, the identities of the people who were fighting for those, who were fighting against settler colonialism, who were fighting against the system of white supremacy that ruled for 300 years in these territories. And of course, there were the criollos who were trying to become independent from Spain. And these were the children of the Spaniards who had everything to benefit from the system of racism and white supremacy. So when I think of Hispanic Heritage Month, I always think of decolonizing first the word Hispanic, right? And really grounding it in our local histories, our local geographies, our local struggles for human dignity and collective liberation. I think it's important to make those connections. What are we celebrating, through Hispanic Heritage Month? Can we even rename it and call it Raza Heritage Month, right? Can we acknowledge not just the individual contributions, but the collective movements? Because I think that's another way of reframing the narrative of who we are. We like to focus, right, within U.S. discourses of individualism. We like to focus on individuals outside of these collective movements for liberation. So for me, I'm always thinking of how can we center the voices of those who have been systematically erased from the narratives. How can we recenter the ancestral histories? How can we center the voices of those who continue to be on the margins? That to me is what I think about when I, even when I don't coincide with the term Hispanic, and I don't identify with that term.
2 points real quickly, because I have to acknowledge that in San Antonio lives Gil Coronado. He's a retired lieutenant colonel who served in the Reagan years, and he's considered the padrino of National Hispanic Heritage Week, because he suggested to the president then we should acknowledge the contributions of those who have served the country. It was a military guy, and those that have contributed to defending the country and in leadership positions. So he was successful in that. We can all look up film of the president in the Rose Garden or the White House lawn, and Gil is standing right there. So our thanks to Gil for making that
and that was
a
under
reality.
Reagan.
That was under the Reagan White House.
Because the 80s, when Reagan came in as president here of the United States, it became like the decade of the Hispanic.
Yes,
Remember
it was
that?
a census thing, and it was a
census,
corporate thing,
yeah.
which is what my, sometimes it's hard for me to articulate what I don't want about National Hispanic Heritage Month, but it's the commercialization that makes me so uncomfortable, that makes me feel, this is not yours. I want you to learn from this, but this is not yours, especially, Coca-Cola or McDonald's. But tell us what you're thinking. I know you branded Raza Heritage, and
I have a story to tell about that, because they did not accept Raza Heritage. And that was when I was at Palo Alto College here on the south side of San Antonio, and I taught there for 15, 16 years. But I did, and that kind of part of the decolonizing of the Hispanic Heritage Month, when I was at Palo Alto College, and we started the Center for Mexican American Studies there, and the Associate of Arts degree in Mexican American Studies and classes, and I taught. Since I found out that Native American Heritage Month was celebrated here in the U.S. in November, so-called Hispanic Heritage is done from September 16th, right, 16, Mexican Independence Day, through mid-October, October 15th. So I combined Hispanic heritage with Native American heritage to better reflect our identity as Mexicanos, as Chicanos, Chicanexes. So that was totally distinctive. So really, and then I started out with Native American / Hispanic Heritage Month, but focusing on the Native American aspect.
Can we assume then that Palo Alto did not like it when you called it Raza?
No, they didn't allow me to do it. I mean,
was that just too political?
I guess
it was too Raza.
Rascuache, I guess. But there was this one young staffer there at Palo Alto College that says, Raza sounds too much like Raza Unida Party.
That's what I was figuring.
A historic political party. We never had another third party that actually won elections throughout South Texas to fight racism and prejudice.
But even, and she was young. She probably wasn't even around when Raza Unida was really at the forefront. And
we were
yet
barely around.
She had heard about that, and I was kind of surprised. But and now it's at Palo Alto when I left, and after I ran it like 4 years, and I retired in 2016. Now it's Latinx Heritage Month.
You see, the labels keep changing.
They keep changing, and
because of colonization.
One of the problem I have with the terms Hispanic and Latino, which are for me are kind of like basically the same thing. A couple of problems is that it's totally European. Latin is the root European language of the Romance languages, Espanol, French, Italian. Hispanic is just like from Spain. It has nothing to do, which I think is our most important aspect of who we are as a people here in the so-called Americas, both continents, North and South America, as indigenous people first, and our ties to...
Which is what our friend John Philip Santos was talking about, mestizaje.
Yeah, and you need to be careful with that term too, because it does have this colonial history.
Oh, it does? Okay.
That's why I think that we need to emphasize the indigenous part of our identity, which I really feel is the most important side of our identity, regardless of where you're from, like throughout, as they call it, Latino America. I always felt that instead of Latino America, they should call it America Indígena. Because if you look at the people, and even the people that they are vilifying so much now in this political season, constant, vilifying and criminalizing us as invaders and murderers and rapists. And that's like, you would think that that's the only issue that the Republicans really care about, and are creating this really
boogeyman
fear amongst the general population of the U.S.,
the mainstream,
which is unfounded, really, and like they're taking our jobs and taking our money and killing our people and raping them. This, study after study shows that these immigrants and asylum seekers, which is legal to seek asylum other places, contribute much more to this country and to the economy than they take out of it.
And they have served in every war that the United States has ever waged, going back to the very first one.
And besides that, if you look at the people there at the border, they're indigenous for the most part, these little brown people. And they're descendants, like we are, of the original, indigenous inhabitants of both of these Americas, North and South, for thousands of years. And yet we've been made to become immigrants in our own land.
Foreigners.
And illegal aliens in our own land.
I'll say what's really interesting to me is I'm listening to Juan and speak, and I think that a lot of the conversations, so I made reference to it earlier when I talk about nomenclature, right, and how we identify individually. This is where it's really nuanced for me, because I don't identify with Hispanic. I have always in my life identified with Latino. And then going through Mexican American studies, which, by the way, plug really quickly, I have known these two for at least 12 years because we've been working on MAS for K-12 for a very long. I've learned so much from them. But going through that process as an early 30-year-old and just learning about who I was, I then realized, oh my God, I have an identity crisis, because how do I now identify? Latina is what I always accepted. Mexican American, because you can't just say Mexican, because it's like the whole, it sounds so cheesy, but it was like an adage I really resonated with when I saw Selena, right? You're not enough over there, but you're not enough over here. And so I think it's generationally what you experience is going to help to dictate how you identify. And I will be very honest, and even being in academia, right? Latinx, I struggle with. And many people in my generation.
I don't use it either.
Many people in my generation struggle with it. I'll use it when I'm writing academic documents, like when I'm writing for academia, but it's not a term that's in my regular repertoire of identifiers, right? And it's because I don't know what it means. It doesn't mean anything to me. And friends of mine don't understand it. But I think for people who are in spaces where academia, is prevalent, and they're trying to talk through,
they're working out their identity too.
Yeah, and so I think we're all sort of in this struggle. But again, so I think about Hispanic was government, associated. Latinx is academia associated, right? What other labels have we been given that we've not given, that we've not owned on our own, right? That we've not taken ourselves. So, but it's just such an interesting conversation.
It's almost another, for me, Hispanic and Latino, even though, excuse me, I'll use sometimes when I'm speaking about all of the Latinos in the U.S. in a kind of a general sense, but it really kind of lumps us all together without really defining who we are. So,
we're so different.
And we're so different.
Yes.
We're not, like they say, I'm Hispanic, I'm a Latina. Yes, but what are you? Are you Puerto Riqueña? Are you, Colombiana? Are you de Peru? Are you Chicana? Are you, the Cuba? There's differences with all of these different países throughout.
There's even differences when you say I'm from California and I'm from Texas. Oh my God, the judgments we make if you're from one or the other are extreme.
And that's the beauty, I think, of our culture. But we are, regardless, that's why I said, instead of calling us Latinos or Latino America, it is America Indígena, because they're more indigenous than they are Latino in so many ways, have that very important spiritual connection to this land that the Europeans don't have, that we do.
I told you this story early on when I came back to San Antonio and started working at the Express News. I started covering American Indians and Native Americans. And Juan Vasquez Jr., who still runs AIT, the American Indians in Texas, was talking about populations and how many Native Americans there are in San Antonio. And he said, well, if you look at indigenous newspapers, they say that the largest indigenous group in the United States is Mexican American. So it kind of put in perspective how he views his own people and who he services in San Antonio. And that links up to your definition too.
Most definitely. And Mexican Americans and Chicanos, here in the United States, by definition, make up 2/3 of the larger Latino population in the U.S., which is about 60 or a little over 60 million now. 2/3 of that are Mexican American,
yes.
Chicano based, which is indigenous.
Yes.
A lot of people still don't understand that even the word Mexican is from the Aztecs, right? The Mexica, Aztecas. So,
and there are all up and down the western coast, right? Mexico was all of that. Yes, Liliana.
No, I was just going to just reiterate that so many of our communities are multi-ethnic and also multiracial.
That's
right. I know I'm seeing this even with my students, who are who might identify as Chicana or Latina and also Black, right? Because their families might be, Central American or Caribbean, South American. But even in Mexico has a third root, So I think it goes back to, I think understanding our identities and the questions that we have about our identities is so connected to questions of our history. Like sometimes we don't know our own histories of racialization. During the colonial period, there were more Black people in Mexico than even mestizos or like criollos, children of Spaniards, of peninsulares.
I was going to say, you think about Yucatan and Veracruz and
because
Guerrero,
they were coming from, they were
Morelos.
being shipped and brought to the Americas all the time, the different coasts.
The Españoles did too.
We also have the runaway slaves, right? The Underground Railroad going
To
into
Mexico.
Right? From South Texas, from San Antonio, which is an area that folks are looking into, that are researching this area, but also going into Laredo, right? So, our histories are very connected.
And it's complicated.
And
Identities.
that's why Hispanic is not, I think, a term that we should be using, because it does privilege the Iberian language. It privileges this idea that our root is in another continent.
Part of the world.
In the colonizing continent, when it's really, our root is Africa. Our root is Indigena. And these are our roots.
And Native. And this conversation would be so different in New Mexico.
Oh, yeah.
Terribly different, where the Iberian connection is very much stressed. Okay, we're running out of time, and we have a treat coming up. But I want us to think about how you'd like to see Hispanic Heritage Month celebrated if you were in charge of something. Go ahead.
Oh, God.
And there's so many organizations that are doing beautiful programming. Last night I went to the Prensa Gala, and Sonny Ozuna was honored, as well as the original members of the Royal Jesters and other groups, and it was beautiful. It's a beautiful way to celebrate the month.
I think gatherings where there's storytelling across cultures, right? Like I love what you said, Liliana, about the multicultural piece of it. My children are Cuban and Mexican, right? And my husband's Mexican and Cuban, and so I think if we can share where we're so much alike, but where we also are incredibly unique, I think is really interesting. And so I would love to see this year round, right? But to have convenings where we're sharing those multicultural aspects of who we are, and then really storytelling and having somebody capture stories from elders. For me, that's one of the most critical things that is missing in our cultural history, because if it isn't written, it's forgotten. Mm-hmm. And so much of those histories are like, our elders are dying, and we need to be able to capture those histories, because otherwise who's telling our story? Mm-hmm. Right. And so I would love to see some sort of convening where it's just open mic storytelling, right? Like, that's beautiful. I would be there. I would take my children so they can learn, right? And stories of perseverance, persistence, right? Struggle, and, and then success. Though for me, that would be powerful.
Liliana,
what was your question again?
How would you celebrate National Hispanic Heritage Month? What would you like to see? What event would you go to?
I would like to see more organizing, like events. Like, how do we organize? How do we create community? How do we create a different world than the one that we have right now? I think we are at a moment where I see this with young people. Like, they want to connect. They want to learn. They want to learn about the stories of their abuelas or their grandparents, and they feel a sense of loss because they might not speak Spanish, right? Or they might not have those family stories because of intergenerational trauma, and a lot of silences around that intergenerational trauma. Mm-hmm. So I think spaces where we can just connect with each other, where people are sharing their stories, their knowledge, the ancestral knowledge. I think that is so important for people in our community.
Wow. I would agree, and I think across the nation, I'm not against celebrating our culture and our history and our important people and sheroes and heroes, and I think that we need to celebrate that. I'm concerned that a lot of times it just confined to 1 month, and the rest of the year, the 11 months, were forgotten about. And still, we are not integrated into the curriculum of our schools and our textbooks. As you all know, as we all well know, we've been in that struggle for many, many years, from pre-K through university years, as much as we should be. Mm-hmm. And I'm talking about not just Mexican-American, Chicano, Chicanx studies, but all of the ethnic studies, African-American studies, Indigenous studies, and even studying, the languages and religions of Europe and all the different ethnic groups. The German presence is big here too. Mm-hmm. But in Texas, when we are, as people of color, over 70% of the student population from pre-K to 12 in public schools in Texas, over 70%. And just as, Mexicanos, Chicanos, Chicanexes, Latinos here in Texas, of these 5.4 million students right now, or a little bit more, just the Mexicano Latinos, we form like 54% of the student population. So it makes sense that we should be appealing to these people that are the great majority of students in our public schools right now, and the school system is not.
Mm-hmm. Amen.
So I think we need to integrate that into our schools and curriculum, textbooks, reading materials, and celebrate it year round. Don't just other it by 1 month. Yeah. And hopefully this will lead to a better understanding of diverse cultures and the world, global culture and society that we live in, and better understanding amongst human beings and all our relatives and relations, that we can hopefully get along more peacefully, not have so much war. And I think ethnic studies
hateful rhetoric.
Ethnic studies will go a long way to eliminating that violence and that rhetoric if we understand each other a little bit better between and among cultures and peoples.
I have a dream about a Hispanic Heritage Month too this year. I would like for all 18-year-olds to get registered to vote, and then everybody make a plan to vote. Vote early, and then if you don't vote early, vote on the day, which is November 5th.
Definitely.
That is my biggest hope. Okay, so Juan brought his button accordion. I won't say who asked him to do that. But he's going to get ready to get it. And I'm going to say goodbye here, and then Juan is going to lead us out. You can watch the video version of Nosotros on YouTube and listen to it anywhere you get your podcast. My Metro column appears on Wednesdays and Fridays in the San Antonio Express News, and you can reach me by email at eayala@express-news.net. Thanks for listening, and see you next time on Nosotros.
And this is a little intro to the Corrido de Frank Tejeda. I'm on a fall tour right now with my book, and I include that as a broadside and play it at the presentations also. That was written by Pete Bautista back in 1986 when he first won for senator. Corrido de Frank Tejeda, a little piece of it. El día 4 de noviembre nunca se me va a olvidar. Fue elegido en San Antonio un hombre de autoridad. Frank Tejeda se llamaba y era del mero Southside. Se lanzó para el Senado del Distrito 19 que él quería representar, para enseñar que sí se puede.
Thank you.
The needle goes on.
Oh, that's beautiful. Thank you for using all those buttons. You used a lot of them.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, yeah.